Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Preacher Boys podcast. Exactly 1 year ago today, the documentary series Let Us Pray, A Ministry of Scandals premiered on Investigation Discovery and HBO Max. I was, of course, honored to be featured in the documentary series, but I was just a small part of the story. Brave survivors and advocates from across the country were all featured and shared their personal pursuit of justice, their advocacy work, and so much more. Today, I'm going to be sitting down with the members of a group that was featured heavily in the documentary series called the Blind Eye Movement. I'll let them introduce themselves, but it was a wonderful conversation. And I got to know so much about each of them individually and about the series that I didn't know before sitting down for this interview. I really hope you'll listen to the entire thing and be sure to go check out the Blind Eye Movement. I have links to it in the show notes of this episode so you can see all the incredible work they continue to do till this day. If you're listening to the podcast on audio version, I encourage you to head over to YouTube and watch the video so you can see the faces of these brave women as they share their story. Thank you so much for listening and for supporting the show and Let Us Pray. I really appreciate it. Let's get to my conversation with members of the Blind Eye Movement. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Preacher Boys podcast. This is the biggest group of people I've ever tried to interview at one time. So this could be unsalvageable, unusable, but I guess we'll see what happens. I first and foremost, welcome on. I know some of you have been on before, or maybe Ruthie, are you the only one that's been on before?
I don't know. Have any of you been on?
So.
Yeah, I think so. Well,
Not
anyway,
yet.
well, there's a lot of firsts here then, which this will be a good time to like kind of introduce you to the audience. So let's take like 60 to 70 seconds each and give like the 10,000 foot view of like what your church was that you were growing up in and how you're all connected now. And Ruthie, I'll let you start since you're a veteran of the Preacher Boys podcast. I'll let you
That
go
doesn't
first.
mean I'm any good. Okay. So my name is Ruthie Heiler. I was born and raised into the IFB. I actually was born at Fairhaven Baptist in Chesterton, Indiana. And we moved when I was 12 to Gaylord, Michigan, and started attending Grace Baptist, which is where I met all of these ladies. And unfortunately, we went through some hard times together. But we're on the other side and working hard to advocate for everyone else that's still there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Chelsea, what about you?
I'm Chelsea Cooper, formerly Chelsea McKee. My story is a little different because I didn't enter the IFB until I was 12. So I grew up in a completely different environment and completely normal compared to the IFB until I was 12. And then I got thrust into it and had to adapt to it. So that was difficult. And I knew all these ladies from Grace Baptist, and an integral part of my story is their story as well. So we have a lot of intertwined pieces in our stories.
Yeah. Larissa?
I am Larissa Newman, formerly known as Larissa D. Philip Antonio. I was actually born into the IFB, as in family members were pastors and evangelists, and as my dad is. So we moved to Grace up when I was in sixth grade, is how I started meeting all of these lovely ladies. And like everyone's saying, we are all intertwined because of all of our stories and the timeline. And it's just one of those things. I'm blessed to be with them.
Yeah. Brianna?
Okay. My name is Brianna Monroe. It used to be Kenyon while we did the documentary, and then Stevenson as I was a kid. So it's changed a few times. But I started going to Grace when I was 5 and then didn't leave until I was 18. So that was like my home, very loyal to that church. And then I met Ruthie as more of a teenager whenever she came. And then Chelsea and Larissa were more my sister's age, and they were like really good friends with my older sister, but still like in passing friends as well. And then now even more friends as we're adults going through all this stuff together, kind of like regrouped through the Blind Eye and stuff and started chatting again. And then Sarah, we met through Blind Eye stuff, and because she was at Grace later on than we were, because we had all left by then, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Sarah, how'd you get introduced?
So, most people know me as Sarah Sundelius. I was born into IFB in Racine, Wisconsin, a little bit oddball out here. I grew up at Southside Baptist in Milwaukee, Wisconsin area, and went to Bible college at Keith Gomez's college, Providence Baptist College in Elgin, Illinois. And very soon after I married, well, now my ex-husband, and we moved to Northern Michigan, where he was from. He grew up in Jim Green's church in Charlevoix, and we went to Landmark in Petoskey and basically churches all over northern Michigan, but we ended up at Grace Baptist, and I ended up teaching there. And that's sort of how I got introduced into all of this. My daughter experienced some abuse from a student of mine that attended Grace Baptist, and that's sort of how we all got together when they found out that other things had been going on at Grace since they left, and realized that things are still continuing. That's when Blind Eye Movement started.
Yeah, I've got a billion questions I could ask about going to Keith Gomez's college. That's like,
and I have a million answers for you.
Yeah, we'll have to do a whole episode on that, because I would love to hear some background on that for sure. But for the purpose of this conversation, I'm curious, with all of you having these shared experiences in the same place, and a smaller church, it's not really known by the general public. This time last year, when you know that a kind of national conversation is about to be sparked about your former church, what were the emotions you were feeling, like November 15th, this time last year, knowing that Let Us Pray is going to be dropping soon? And for the record, I don't think people realize none of us had seen it. So there's definitely that like anticipation and fear of like, one, is it going to be good? Two, is it going to do justice to the stories? And like, what's the response going to be? What was the general like feeling in the weeks leading up?
Nervous, scared, anxious, because we didn't know what was coming and what was going to be in there. We knew we were telling our stories, but what was the depth of it, and then how they blended all of us together, I thought was, as we were sitting watching it, I was just like, oh my gosh, I just cried when I watched it, because it was so empowering to see so many other stories at the same time mine was going on and happening. And it just gave me so much more peace about it. But I was so anxious knowing it was coming. I'm like, oh gosh, all my family's going to see this. All these people like that have no clue of like my story and me coming out about it. And I was like, oh no. So I know I was terrified at first, because there were so many people that had not a clue of anything that happened to me. So It's crazy. I feel good now.
Yeah. I was very anxious, because when you give your story to people that don't 100% understand what you went through in the IFB, it definitely is scary to think, like, how are they going to have this play out to where people understand what we actually went through? And I think that was my biggest fear going into it, for sure.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people in my life that, like, if I casually mentioned, yeah, I grew up in a cult, some people would really question that and be like, why do you say that? What exactly made it a cult? And it was really validating to be like, well, there's a documentary on HBO about it, and you can watch it, and I'm in it for a couple minutes. And it really validates just like everything that I went through and how horrific it actually was.
I'm curious, like, leading up to it, and this was a question I thought of as I was talking to Rachel and April and Kathy, but when it was leading up to it, did you have certain people in your mind that you were thinking like, oh, I hope that they watch it? And like, I'm sure there were people like, you're like, oh, I hope they watch it because it'll help them. And then I'm sure there were others you were like, I hope they watch this so they see like, that they're out there and people know about it now. In your mind, did you have like a certain audience member, quote unquote, in your mind leading up to the premiere?
As in some of the people back from Grace that are now there, even though, are we allowed to say names, as in Jenkins and Haglin, that I wanted them to see it, because they kept saying, even though they knew, like, they didn't really believe a lot of it happened. And it's like, no, it really did. And we saw justice through. And being able to have clips of that, it was like validating, like, hey, I hope everyone's seeing this. And I hope you tell your church members about it because it is true and it did happen. And there's a lot of our stories that intertwine in that. So I was really hoping those two were seeing it.
Right.
Yeah. I definitely think a lot of the naysayers, or whatever you want to call them, at, Grace Baptist, that basically refused to see what had happened, even though Aaron Willand had been convicted previously. They still denied that, a rape ever happened, and they denied that he was at fault. And I think that was the most frustrating thing to me, that I wanted people to see that and be like, this really did happen. And not only that, but we were so failed. Not just me and Larissa, but Brianna, and everyone that tried to warn adults about it. That's where Chelsea comes in. And, so all of them, of course. And then I think another big thing for me is I wanted potential victims of Aaron Willand or Dave Beckner or these other, pedophiles within this church, to see that they're not alone and maybe come forward and start getting healing, or any victim for that matter.
Well, from my part, as a teacher, a former teacher within IFB, I was really hoping that it would reach people who are stuck in impossible situations. They may not be able to talk to me anymore or talk to some of these ladies anymore, but or other people who have left, because once you leave, you're a bit of a pariah. But seeing something on TV or catching it in clips on the internet, it gives them validation for what they're going through, what they're experiencing within IFB or other very conservative Christian movements. And I just hope that the people that needed to see it for that validation, for that next step, to get out or to make a plan, were able to.
Yeah. Ruth, you mentioned something earlier about like trusting your story to somebody, and then also, you're trusting filmmakers who are not from that world. So, and I know in the early calls, I think 2020 was the first phone call ever with them when they were like first starting to put stuff together, maybe 2021. And I remember saying, like, my biggest concern about you guys doing this is that it's a lot to understand. And like, there's so many pieces. And I said, I'm in this all the time and I get confused by who's who and what's what and what circle is this. And, but I think on one hand, there was that element where like that could be a weakness, which I think they did a really good job grasping what it was.
Definitely.
But on the other hand, it's a strength because they are coming at it with fresh eyes. And so the stuff that we could casually on this call, we all grew up in the, pretty similar way. We would just offhandedly be like, oh yeah, we used to do that. Like for them, they would sit there and go, what? Like,
Yeah.
slow down, say that again. Were there some moments during filming for any of you where you remember saying something that to you was like just a pretty much everyday thing that they kind of stopped and went, oh my God, like, please say that again. What are you talking about? It looks like Brianna has one.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Like, I don't know if this is like, okay, so it kind of relates to that, but like one of the most like, I don't know, like crazy moment for me while filming, and like super embarrassing in a way. Because like we were talking for some reason, like in the hotel room, and it was like all these, camera crews were around, and it was a giant group of us when we had this big meeting up in Gaylord. And somehow it got brought up that I like got put in a trunk. And to me, I like had thought about it so many times. And it was like, I don't know, like nothing by then. Like I was like, oh yeah, whatever. And everyone just like, in like the room, like everyone just got like so upset. And I was just like, what? Like, it's normal. You get kidnapped all the time and, or whatever. I don't know. They're just super weird. But like the idea that like some stuff that was super abusive or super creepy or super bad in our world, we kind of like got used to, or, creepy pastors or whatever. And like people on the outside are like, what? They did that? Or especially people like in girls' homes and things like that, that they're just like, yeah, that's how we grew up. So I can totally see like people not understanding the way we grew up at all.
What,
Right.
expound on this trunk story, because I just did the same face as you were casually saying that.
We have dark humor about a lot of
Yeah,
things.
we
We're
have to
not laughing
joke.
because it's funny, but like that's
Very
how,
I
gallows
figured.
humor.
yeah.
We have to laugh to make us feel okay.
Yeah. Well, I was pretty young and naive and very like, I don't know, I just did everything my abuser told me to do. So it was David Vector, and he was trying to like sneak me in and out of his house. And I guess he had his kids with him and stuff like that. And I made it to his house in the regular form of riding in a car. And then on the way back, he somehow had to sneak me because he wasn't alone. And I had to get into the trunk. So he was just like, yeah, just get in the trunk. We'll hide from the kids. And I was like, okay. And I was talking to Ruthie about this the other day, and he was just like, shut the trunk, I love you, or something like that. And then I was like, more, or something so like casual, like, yeah, I love you too, man. And I'm laying in the trunk and it's like pitch black. I
Yeah.
wrote a song about it because it's just like so bizarre that I did that. And like,
Didn't I
didn't really
say
think much of it.
something about, yeah, well, you were a kid and a little bit dumb, just like
Yeah,
I was
like,
a kid and dumb and got in an airplane and went back to
And I'm like, I
somebody
could have
that-
died back there. Like, what if there was an accident and someone like crushed the back, and there I am, like just
Right.
squished in the trunk. So yeah, and then he like dropped me off in this alley, so my mom didn't see me like get out of his car, which I don't know why. Like, I thought he had a story, like we were doing guitar lessons or something.
Right.
So I don't know why that had to also be a secret, but at that time I think he was like gonna get caught kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had to get out of the trunk in the back of this alley where this resale shop used to be. I don't know, it's just like so crazy, and then walk home the rest of the way. Like, what? Everything's fine.
Right.
Nothing just happened.
Yeah. In for context too, like I know in the like I wasn't there obviously when they were filming all of the stuff with Blind Eye and Gaylord. So how did that all come together? Because like I was asking so many questions. It was probably so annoying every time we were with Sharon. I was like, so where'd you film? What did you do? Who were you filming with? What church are you covering? And I know that there was the meeting. Was the meeting like a product of the documentary? Like, oh, we want to get all of you in one spot? Was the meeting something that was happening and then they went and filmed it? Like, what were those days of filming like? Because I know in the actual like story, it's kind of like a springboard to go into like the active story that was happening with the court case and everything. What all happened during that filming that people probably didn't see in the documentary, and like what were those conversations?
Yeah.
I
So
Ruthie.
okay, so obviously Sarah Smith's article, you're very familiar with that. So that we talked to Sarah Smith, or I first talked to her in 2018, after a ex-church member from Grace had reached out to me. And then that's how I kind of got into it. And Sarah Smith, from what I understand, was approached by Sharon and Sam, the production crew, and she got them in touch with us. And then from there, we had the Blind Eye movement. We had a meeting in Gaylord to kind of spread awareness. And they came up and filmed that. And then we had a meeting with a bunch of us former Grace members in a hotel room, and they filmed it, and we just went around. And that's where the one scene where I said, if they don't answer on this earth, they will before God, that was in that meeting.
Yeah.
And this all happened in 2019. It was like March, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
March was the big meeting.
And then I know that I originally filmed a pretty long interview then too. And none of that was shown. We did like a lot of filming while they were there, and very few bits and pieces of that were shown. But it was really nice to all sit in that room, and we all kind of like threw things off each other that we were putting together in real time that none of us individually had known before. And it was kind of a, oh my God moment for us. Like you were saying, for the production crew, like, oh my God, that really happened. We were all figuring things out in that room, and it was like, it's giving me chills. It was amazing.
Yeah.
I know. I wish we could have all recorded it ourselves. Like, it's almost
We didn't think
sad
about
we
it.
don't have that footage, because there were so many like aha moments, like she said. Like,
say that was the first time that they talked with me, because I had just come out and talked and had a meeting with our attorney and talked with our detective who was on our case and stuff being able to first give them even more details in like actual letter. So a lot of them were shocked that were in the room, like, wait, why is she here? What?
Yeah.
And that's when I had to like,
Wow.
no, this is true. This is my story. And that's when I came out. So I think that roundtable meeting area that we had was like amazing because I didn't feel like so alone anymore.
Yeah. And we're just the tip of the
me.
iceberg from Grace Baptist. I mean,
Right.
there are so many
Yeah.
victims that weren't shown in the documentary. There were so many victims in that room that we just were able to all tell each other what had happened to us and how, and their parents were there and could tell how, you know, they were treated by John Jenkins when they tried to protect their kids and things like that. So it's a huge iceberg and we're just the tip, like literally.
Oh, yeah.
It was kind of
It's
like a
crazy.
camp meeting, but like in a way better way because it was all genuine and real, and you know, like our tears weren't just like I sinned. You know, it was like, oh my gosh, we get this off our chest.
Yeah.
Because that's sometimes like I think about that, and a lot of like those camp meetings and church meetings where everyone's like, praise Jesus, hallelujah. Here's this teenager girl crying on her knees. A lot of times I was crying because I was going through hell. You know,
Yeah.
like let's face it, like because
Same.
I felt so guilty, like,
Same.
oh my God, I'm going to hell because like I'm not a virgin. And so you just cry, like, I don't know how to get out of this situation. And I think I just said that in one of my other videos, like just be like, oh, bless her heart, she's getting right with the Lord. When really it's like, no, I just have a pedophile.
No.
You know, like I'm just
Same.
falling apart.
Yeah.
Another notable thing that happened during that is we actually went to Grace Baptist and confronted Jenkins in front of.
Oh yeah.
Hey, I did record that. So
Yes,
That's awesome.
yeah, we found out that they were having a church meeting about changing their policies with like staff and church members and being involved with children. So we decided to go to the meeting and kind of see what they were doing and see if it was positive change and kind of just know if they were really trying to protect children. And it was very eye-opening because I felt like personally, of course, Gibbs was there, their attorney, and I feel like they were getting a lot of attention from local media, and it was a way to save face. After going to that, that's just how I felt. Correct me if you guys think something different, but that's how I felt leaving that.
Which Gibbs was it?
I feel the same.
The young one, the
Gibbs
son.
the third?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they released a statement and everything that was complete BS. It was just full of lies. And yeah, it was all about saving face. And then when they couldn't save face anymore, John Jenkins then was called by God to go to North Carolina. So, you know,
Jesus
Funny how
saved.
it works.
So for my part of things, I spent hours upon hours explaining to the production crew what was expected of women, what was expected of children, pregnancy, what they still expected us to do, just how things work in IFB for women, for children, why we didn't have a voice, why things are the way they are. And none of that was used, but they said that it did help provide a lot of insight to them as they were going through. They didn't even know, like, some of the kids' songs, some of the things that the children sing in children's church. Like, it's deplorable. And like, they're like, they have children sing that? Like, they were just so appalled at the things that we all had to experience, and just giving them that foundation. So much of my interviews were not used because my daughter is a minor, and of course, to protect her identity and our family, they didn't use very much. But there was a lot of filming, even for something I said, and I appeared in there just a few minutes, but the thing that really shone through was that it's still happening. Like, that I was mostly included because they had to show that things were still occurring at Grace Baptist in 2017, 2018. when they experienced it in the early 2000s. Like, this wasn't something that stopped.
Yeah.
It kept going, and it may still be going on today. I don't know. Certainly can't speak for anything over there now, but for what it's worth.
But at least the school basically shut down within that time,
Yeah,
right?
the
And the
school
college.
shut down. They said that was my fault.
Yeah.
Good work.
No.
Yay.
I mean, I feel like that's a huge win. Like sometimes I forget that even happened. Like it's just so much happened that I feel like we need to take a moment of silence that they don't have the school, because then none of future of your daughters can actually happen.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, they
was
also closed the college too.
Well,
Yeah.
So thankfully they
things were
can't train
financial.
anymore.
It was financial, but it was really easy to have a scapegoat in a mom that hopped on local TV with the news station and had an article in the paper, with just barely not current staff member.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I can't imagine that helped them financially either, so I'll give you some credit on that too.
Yeah.
I think that's
thanks, Eric.
I'm just still taking the credit. It was us. No.
Yeah.
For,
We were that nail in the coffin.
for you're all great nails in my coffins. For Brianna, for you and Chelsea, for you as well, what was your filming days like? Did you film beyond those initial group days where you guys all got together in Gaylord, and what did that all entail?
For me, it mainly was the Gaylord trip, and then there was another time for going to Gaylord where I saw you guys, Larissa and you. Yeah. So I was there for that one. I didn't do much there personally, but then there was another time that they came to my house, and it was like 6 hours of filming. So that was interesting. I kind of had to keep my kids like playing in their room, but like the team was so amazing. Like they brought them lunch and they kept checking on them for me, and I was like so nervous. Like I felt bad, like sorry kids, you're gonna shoot, But I mean, it was a really great experience. It was really good just to be heard, and they were so sweet and just so thankful that I was willing to share, like whether or not they can use it. Like I feel like people meet for a reason, and I think like all interactions are super important, like because they can make your life better or make your life worse depending on the interaction. And I feel like all the way around, it just made all of our lives better, getting to meet and getting to have the experience of sharing each other's stories, So, I mean, I really appreciated it. Chelsea.
Yeah, I only filmed a couple times. I think I filmed like 3 times, and I was more of like a supportive character. And that's really what I wanted my story to reflect, is that, I didn't go through some of the traumas that these other girls went through, but they were part of my formative years in the way that it was just a lot to handle back then. And it was good though for me, because every time we would film, it would take a lot out of me and like a lot out of all of us. And so to the point where my doctor was asking me, have you gone through something traumatic recently? And I thought about it, and I was like, actually, yeah, I did. And so it was kind of good that it was limited a little bit, but it was great. Also, it connected us in a way like we haven't seen each other in person probably like 15 years before that. So it was a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you come to Lansing too? At the
Yeah,
end?
I was going to say we did that.
Yeah, I forgot that there was another time where we met at the Capitol. That was really cool.
What was
And I loved every time we saw Chelsea, like she gave us another piece of insight that like we didn't have, because she could see things in a totally different perspective, like watch our like trauma kind of eat us alive and watch our behaviors. And then she like wrote letters to like my perp and stuff and like tried to help me, and I had no idea like what she was doing for me back then. So it's like war buddies kind of,
Yeah. Yeah. What happened at the Capitol? Why were you guys storming the Capitol together?
Chelsea, this is your area. I feel
Go ahead, Chelsea.
No, we were meeting with Representative Julie Brixey.
Yeah.
Okay.
She was representing a new bill that would lower the statute of limitations. And she was explaining to us how lobbyists from religious organizations can get that stopped, and what they do to stop those things. And the bill, correct me, I don't remember if it went through or not. I want to say that it did not.
It did not.
Okay. I was going to say, I really wanted to ask her recently, but I just didn't get a chance to connect.
That was I think the most insightful thing that I took away from that conversation with her was the fact that these religious organizations, like the Catholic Church that have their own, issues, these large religious organizations put stops to these bills that they're trying to pass because of basically money. And insurance companies, they don't want to pay these out. So they're all stopping these bills from passing that could help so many victims. I mean, my statute of limitations was up by like 2 years. So I could not civilly sue the church because of my age. So the cutoff in Michigan, correct me if I'm wrong, is 28 and I was 30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So many victims are
Yep.
childhood victims of abuse are getting older and they don't even know. First off, they have to absorb what happened to them. And they don't even know that suing somebody or getting justice in that way is a possibility. And so by the time they do, I mean, think of where you are in life at 28 years old. You're still a little bit naive. So yeah, it's really frustrating to know that these organizations are putting money ahead of victims that truly could use the help.
Yeah.
No, there's another elephant in the room as to why that bill didn't get passed, and it's because someone, Lee Chatfield, was
Yes.
he was in leadership at the time in state government in Michigan, and he was a perpetrator of someone who was with us at the Capitol. I'm not going to tell her story, but because he literally was a perp, and that would help his victim or victims be able to tell on him and get him out of office, which thankfully he was taken out of office. But that's another reason why that didn't pass. The people that had power to pass it, it was bipartisan, and he helped sink that ship.
But
You
he
just
also
unlocked
knew
a
that
huge memory there.
that lady also, his victim actually went to grace with us.
Yeah.
And he started hearing our stories. So I think that was the biggest push also, because he heard about how loud and boisterous we were becoming. And he knew that she knew us.
Yeah.
This is so interesting to me so far because one, I'm learning so many things I had not known, but I just remembered, I don't know if you remember this, Ruthie, because I forgot like most of what we talked about because I was so nervous when we did our episode together in Michigan. And I was nervous because I'd never talked to you at all. And then they're like, there's no time to get to know each other. Hit record. We've been here all day.
Yeah. And I was directly off an airplane.
Yeah.
Oh, here you go.
And I had done my like 6 hours of filming and then all this stuff. And so I was like 50 Red Bulls into my day. And then like I had all my notes and then they're like, none of these questions are working. Ask these questions. And I forgot that like a big part of my questions were around the Chatfield story. And like there was originally this thread to that bill and Chatfield and the connection to Grace. I forgot all of that until right now. And I'm curious, that kind of brings me to my next question, which is obviously, and it's why I love getting to talk to everyone. There's so many things that were filmed over from 2019 to 2022 or 2021 that is on a cutting room floor and you know, entire moments like kind of were shot and then fed into the narrative in ways that aren't seen. But there's so many cool things. Like for me, I did like the show and tell thing with a bunch of objects from like IFB history. That was really fun. Wouldn't have fit anywhere in the documentary. So I know why they cut it, you know? Rachel, Kathy, and April just shared, you know, they got to do a scene with their detective and talk through him taking on this case that was so many years old. And like, they had this really emotional reconnection. And again, they recognize why that was cut from the flow of the documentary, but it's these really cool moments. And you know, for me, I mean, Ruthie, I had a great time getting to go to dinner with you and Sharon and like actually get to talk and get to know each other. Like there was lots of neat moments like that. When it came to the actual like assembled finished documentary, like setting aside all the things that were like, you could always add more, right? There's always more colleges to talk about, always more churches.
They need another season.
Yes, they do.
So there's your plug.
I second that.
They need a new season for sure.
So many more seasons.
But I'm curious, like, you know, especially Ruthie, I mean, you really, your victim impact statement closing that documentary is my favorite part of the documentary, where it like shows the close-ups of all those people in the courtroom, where your story is kind of a representation of their stories, and then the hundreds of thousands of people in the country that would resonate with your story. How do you all feel the documentary did in capturing the spirit of, what Blind Eye Movement's trying to do, what survivor advocates are trying to do? Like, did you walk away feeling like that's exactly what I wanted to share? Did you walk away going like, oh, I wish it had covered this one piece that I feel like was missing? Like, what was the overall like takeaway once the credits kind of rolled?
I thought it was really well put together. I just felt like it was too short. I wanted so much more. I wanted them to kind of show a little bit more of each church and the victims that were there and how it all tied together. But I understand they had a time limit, and I mean, they could have done a whole season on Just Grace Baptist. So I get it. But I do think that they did a really good job showing that even though we are victims spread out across the country, in this case, that we were all so easily able to connect because of what we went through. And I think they did a really good job showing that.
Yeah, like the maps, the timelines, the different pastors connecting. That I love that. Like, even for me, sometimes I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that person was connected to that person, or that pastor is the same as that pastor, So, I mean, I think they did a very professional, like really classy job.
Yeah.
And how they did it, I thought was beautiful, because they pinned each of our, even though we were all together for our group, the Blind Eye, and our situations and stories, but in how they went back from, oh, here's Rachel's, here's April's. I mean, and they went through everybody's, and we were all like, here's a piece of here, here's a piece of here. And I thought it was beautifully collaborated all together for us. They did a great job.
There's obviously like watching it, right? And then like, so there's all those fears that we talked about where it's like, is this going to be okay? And then we all know how pastors are, where we're like, they're going to cut something that doesn't work. And then that's going to be easy fodder for them forever. That was like one of my big concerns. But also like there's the advocacy at large, right? Like, I think this is kind of the interesting thing about the process for me, because I know when we got on the call with Investigation Discovery, and I think it was Investigation Discovery we did that group call with, and they were like, get ready because it's going to come out and like your names are out there. And I know I was making eye contact with a lot of people on the Zoom where we're like, been there, done that. Like, we're already doing that. Names are out there. When that last episode was done and you snap back to like, okay, well, that wasn't bad. That's good. That's a good thing. There's also like, what now? Like, now there's tons of more work to do. There's tons more churches. We could do 60 seasons of this. Dave Hiles could get a good 5 episodes and we could cover just a little bit of his life. Did you feel like this optimism of like, okay, this is going to engage with like a really big conversation now? Did you feel kind of like, well, this isn't going to change everything overnight? And that just hit me. Like, what was kind of the emotional feeling in terms of advocacy as a whole at the end?
I think we accomplished our goal. I think everyone's mutual goal was to shine a light on the IFB and like the abuse that a lot of people are enduring within it. And I think we did that. Was it not as large? Did it not include every church that maybe some people would like to have been included? No. But we started the conversation with this because I don't think there was ever a show, and correct me if I'm wrong, a documentary or even an article about IFB before this. I mean, maybe small ones, but nothing to this magnitude. So I think
Sarah Smith's article. For
no,
sure.
but that's what I mean. Like
before
Sarah Smith's article before that, because to me, Sarah Smith started all of this.
Did.
Yeah.
And so before that, I don't feel like there were small articles, that we still see today. This pastor is an abuser. But as far as how it's all connected and how IFB is as a whole, I don't think there was anything. And so I think they definitely accomplished starting that conversation.
Yeah.
And I really liked how they nailed Jenkins in the documentary. Like, there was huge parts of episodes that were just exposing him And I honestly thought he was cooked after that. Like, I didn't think that his church was going to keep him on. And obviously he still has his job, which doesn't make any sense to me. But I'm pretty sure I heard someone in their town like started a petition to get him out of it and stuff.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
it brought some attention for sure.
Definitely.
Well, technically,
Oh,
he
yeah.
didn't keep his original job. Like, just to
Yes.
say that he did have to move away.
Yeah.
Well, he was called by God to
Yes,
move
he was.
away.
Yeah, called by God.
But
Yeah.
I
He still
think that.
pops up in my recommended on Twitter, and I'm like,
Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
I'm blocked.
no.
I'm
I'm blocked.
Hardcore
I'm
blocked.
blocked
Years
by
ago.
I'm blocked by everybody when I started calling out names. So
Yeah.
bye.
I think if I can just say one sad thing about the documentary, it's not like, not to say it's bad for them. It's almost like just a guilt thing that because we have so many victims come to us after the documentary. I mean, we've had a bunch before, but definitely after because of the exposure. I almost feel like some victims get the feeling of like we can rescue them because of the documentary got to come in and expose all these things. I think they think that the documentary like rescued us in a way, and they want so badly to join that effort and like to be
Yeah.
able to like tell their story and like be saved from theirs and like expose their church. And I just feel so guilty. And like, I'm so sorry. Like, we're not actually the film crew. Like, we don't go and investigate people, and we can't really like, expose your whole church the way that maybe the documentary looks like it happened, I guess, if that makes sense. Cause I mean, obviously, like they had to cut out so much of just the ones they know about. And then here's more hundreds flooding to us being like, me too. Like, come talk to us, like expose this pastor and it's happening here. Like, can you help us?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like overwhelming because like this is our group, like this is like our blind eye group is like right here. It's not very big. So, and we're victims ourselves and we're working and we're like have families. So it's very overwhelming in my opinion, but like we're doing our best. So just for everyone like coming and like wanting to talk to us and stuff, like we are absolutely doing our best and we're here for you. It's just, it is kind of scary how huge it is and very sad at the same time that there are so many victims. So we're hoping to like keep everybody in this conversation so that you can get the help and support you need, like with all of us, like alongside of us, if that makes sense.
Well, I think that is, and I'm sure others have answered on that, so I don't want to cut off any answers, but I do want to address this before I forget. But I think one thing that I do want to say for people listening though is like the documentary is very cool. Like it's very cool that it's not, no hate on YouTube because I'm on YouTube, but like it's bigger than being a YouTube channel or a podcast. Like to have that investigation discovery logo or an HBO Max logo gives this validity, I think, to mainstream culture that is really neat. And it's something none of us like. I don't think any of you know. If you do, please let me know any, high profile entertainment industry connections that could make that happen. So like, that is a very cool thing. But I also want to shout out the fact that like everybody in the documentary has been a badass for a long time before the documentary came out. And like the documentary isn't what led to, seeing your abusers put behind bars. It's not what led to you sharing your voice out loud. Like it came about because you were doing that. Like it was documenting you already doing amazing things. So like for the people coming forward that might feel like, oh, I missed the boat for, this big opportunity. It's like that just documented the cool things you were already doing and the things that you are equipped to share. Like, hey, this is what it's like to go through this. This is how many years it really took. It didn't take us 4 30-minute, episodes to have justice. It's like, no, this was just the process of filming alone where it's already in the middle of it was 2019. I mean, that's a long time. Yeah. So I think I just want to put some of the like emphasis back on, like Brianna, you were already doing stuff like Blind Eye was there pre-documentary. Like the documentary didn't create that momentum.
It's funny because like everything you just said like is super meaningful. I feel like I feel like that can touch so many people just because you're so right, and I didn't even think about it like that. So it's very cool.
It came up because me and Rachel talked a lot before the documentary came out, and we had a lot of those like, because I would watch other stuff on, different networks. I was like, what if it's cheesy? And like, we were having like all those like panicky discussions, and they're like, what if they get this guy's name wrong or put him to the wrong church or whatever? And Rachel was like talking about some of that stuff like 2 days before, and she's like, what do we do if it's not good? Like we're all assuming it's going to be good, And I said, then we'll get on a podcast like the next day and we can course correct what's being said. Like there is already so much that we can all do. And, thankfully we got a good version of it. We're not embarrassed to be associated with it. And like, it did a good job, but like, yeah, I do want people to hear that. It's like, it's not like, oh, the documentary came and said like, oh, here's your path to justice. Like, and we'll film it. It's like,
it just helped
we're already doing
project
it.
our voices. We were already telling our stories for a long time. It just definitely projected it and made it a lot more visible to many more people. So for that, I mean, it's huge.
Did you have more that reached out than you expected after it came out? 'Cause I know there was a massive reach out after. I was watching your Facebook like explode in the next few days. Did you expect like anybody was part of your mind going like, some people will see it, or like was it just like, oh my God, there's so many, I don't even know where to start addressing this?
Oh my God, there's so many. For all of us, it was crazy.
Shifts.
Yeah.
It was basically around the clock. Basically whoever was awake, whoever could, we would, answer 10. Okay, I answered 10 more. Okay. 80 messages. And it was just, we're trying to absorb this. This is the first time that this has gone public, super public, nationwide public. We're still trying to process, we'll get back with you. We'll get back in touch with you. We'll do our very best to help. We would chit chat with some needed a lot of support. It brought up things it brought up their stories. They wanted to tell their stories. They wanted to be a part. They wanted to know what to do. My daughter went through something. My child went through something. I went through something. How do I report? What do I do? And just coming up with the step-by-step instructions, if you will, of what to do.
Yeah,
how to report, how to advocate.
Mm-hmm. I even remember a message where a woman reached out and she said, this happened to me, I think it was like 30 years ago. My abuser's passed on, but I want to name him. And she put his name in the chat or in the message. And I just like broke down because there's people, all eyes were on us. And it was like some of them that couldn't get justice for whatever reason were kind of living through us. And that just put a whole new meaning on what this all means to me personally, and probably to some others, but it was amazing to experience that.
Yeah. And I think that's really cool. Like Sarah, with the story you just mentioned is like, I forget who I was talking to recently, but I was talking about, I feel like there's some people in whatever this is called that would all do like this space. And I feel like, especially like I've noticed a lot of like evangelical pastors like switch gears and like, now I'm going to write a book about this, and it's like, it feels very artificial and like it's jumping on the bandwagon. And I was trying to explain to someone like, there's certain people in that space like I don't want to interview because like I feel like, and I was like trying to articulate it and I said, I feel like if there wasn't a book in it, a camera on, or a social platform to grow, I can't imagine them spending their time like helping somebody, like if it wasn't going to lead to any clout for them. And like the story you just gave, Sarah, is like so cool to me because it's like, yeah, you're taking time that you don't need to, like you're taking time that is time from family, time from yourself. Like all of you, like Brianna said, are survivors yourself, so like you're navigating your own healing, but like to be willing to take that time says so much about you, especially after a big emotional gut punch, like I'm sure seeing all of this put out on TV was. So I think that's really cool. I want to shout that out as well.
Well, one other thing that, if it's okay to highlight, is people were like, well, I'm going to hop on social media and I'm going to tell my story like you guys did. And it's like, okay, I'm not telling you don't do that. Tell your story. You do you. But if your abuser hasn't been prosecuted, you do not want those details out until there's already something going with the police, until he's had his day in court. Like there are things that we did in advance, like especially like with my daughter's situation, her perpetrator had already received the harshest sentence of any juvenile in Otsego County before I'd even talked to any of these ladies. the crime had been dealt with, at least to the extent that it could be.
Yeah.
It had been dealt with legally. And to put those details out into the ether before the perpetrator is caught and prosecuted can sometimes eliminate the chances of that happening. And that was really hard for a lot of people to swallow as well. Like, you can't just throw out information into the World Wide Web and expect that perpetrator can't also hop online and say, yeah, crazy person, that didn't happen. It's very important to go through proper channels and to report to the police. So it was report, 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 report. And just how important it is to report any instances that you see. When a child is involved, when you know of someone who's been hurt, you just became a mandated reporter. Congratulations, you get to make a call.
Yeah. It's frustrating too. And I'm sure you all feel like this with all the stories you're getting, is like, it's frustrating sometimes when you have the information and you want it to be out there so bad, but then it's like, I can't even count. I mean, there's full episodes I've recorded as far back as 2020 where they've never seen the light of day because they immediately were like, I was like, this feels like it needs to go to a lawyer, or this feels like it needs to go to law enforcement, or this piece here, I think, is an opening. And then some of those stories, like one in particular that is still, I think, the most horrific story I've heard doing the show, like, for their safety could not come out, like the situation they were in. So it's like, it's heartbreaking knowing how many stories, like, I think people watch Let Us Pray, or they listen to the show, or they start tallying in their mind, like, okay, there were 500 stories in Spirit of Fear in that article. There was this many in Let Us Pray. But it's like, for every one of those that makes it to mainstream media, like a news article or that, it's like there are dozens, hundreds, like who knows how many that just can't come out. When I start thinking about like the scale of it beyond what people see, and all of us here can relate to that. Like, once you know like how many stories don't make it to being public, it's like that's when I start spiraling, go like, oh my God, this is like so much worse than I initially knew a couple years ago. With that in mind, I guess I want to ask this question, and I don't want to bring the mood down if we all feel pessimistic, but looking at it now, like, we're a year out from the documentary dropping, we're several years out from, initially these stories coming forward. And, for many here, a couple decades out from initial abuse starting. So like, looking at how things are now, a lot of like the hype and discourse has, I feel like, died down a little bit, as it always does. How do you feel right now? Like, do you feel optimistic about the current state of things? Do you feel cynical about the state of things? Do you feel like, why do people have such short attention spans? Like, do you feel like there's some really good things happening in the background? Like, what's the temp check of everybody right now in terms of like advocacy in general and like documenting these stories? And anybody can answer this. Yeah.
Okay. I kind of feel like right now it's the slow and steady burn of just getting things done in the background. Like, it doesn't seem as glamorous right now, but in talking to other victims, it's more like just that first step of them doing all the dirty work behind the scenes that's not glamorous, and that's might not be on TV because it's boring. It's the paperwork that they're filling out. It's finally telling their parents, or it's someone trying to look for a house because they have to leave their situation. It's like seemingly boring, but I feel like it's still going. Like, I mean, we're still talking to people. There's still messages, and part of me feels really bad. Like, I need to circle back now, like a year later, and like check on all those messages, but there's so many. It is overwhelming, and I feel bad for those that like maybe they didn't feel as helped. But like I said, like, we do our best to like give the advice of like, what can you do now? Because we can't go and take a plane and rescue all the victims. Like, we wish we could. Like, we wish we could. We wish we could meet them all and like talk to all of them and be like, we're here for you. You know what I mean? Yeah. But it's just not realistic for like who we are and what we're doing, and we all have jobs. You know what I mean? Like, I wish we could make it our full-time job to just take everyone out of their situation and help them launch to where we are now. Because most of all of us, I believe, got justice, and that's like a magical place. So that's kind of where like we just try to make videos and posts about like, you can get here, and like kind of here's how. Yeah. And it's not always glamorous. Like I said, it's not always the fun part, but it's like the hard work part where you have to put in the daily grind of healing, the daily grind of making those tough decisions to go to court or to file that first police report or to tell your parents, like, because all those were the things that we were doing, way back when. But someone else can go.
Well, it's also the timeline. It's not, a lot of people are like, oh, it's the video. We were seeing the documentary and they're looking at it as, oh, all of this, it seemed like everything went pretty quick. Well, I came out in 2019 for the first time in 22 years. So it's a process for even me to even get to that point. And we've seen victims and they're wanting to say something, but they're still scared because I would tell everyone, it's in your own time. You can't rush anything. It took a lot to get to going to talk to a detective and coming out even about it fully, because you still have that fears and the worries and the doubts. But some of the stories, like as we would get so many messages, we were all still healing in our own time and trying to process and try to go through our court situation and having to face everything up front. And then now we're looking back and I'm like, oh, we survived. I made it. I did it. And now it's like I'm healing and you see all of these messages come in and it's like you want to help everyone. But then sometimes it can even put you back a little bit, like it's too overwhelming. It puts that, like, for me, it's like that PTSD because I try to want to help and I'm like, it's just too much. I can't handle it. I'm not in that mental place. Hey, can someone else take this message, kind of thing? And we'd pass messages around because some stories, it just got too personal for each of us. But I think being able to now in that low time, it's like, okay, it makes it easier now that we've all had our healing and some time to like grasp the concept of, hey, I know you. I've seen you on TV. I'm like, oh, yeah, I was there, kind of thing. And then now they're like telling me your story. I'm like, go ahead. I was like, ask me anything you want. I'm okay with it now. I'm free to ask. And I've had so many people even close friends and family members start talking to me about things. I'm like, ask away. I'm an open book. Let it out. I'm a safe zone. And it's still that same. I just feel like it's still a good healing time for everyone. It's not all glamorous. It's in the background, but it's like, it's not as crazy as when the show just came out. And that's what's nicer. So it's like you can have a little bit more like time with people and talk with them and let them feel their voice is heard, even if it's just telling us.
I feel like as far as like IFB is concerned, I feel like this has been very eye-opening for me. And I feel like there's no, like, when we first started filming and doing the article, I'm like, oh, we can bring about so much change within the IFB. And now looking back after, clear evidence was released, like Chelsea was talking about, things about Jenkins that were like in black and white, he didn't report something that he has always claimed he did. And people make excuses. Oh, well, they couldn't find the report. Things can get lost. Well, this isn't the 1950s. Things aren't on paper. It's in a computer and it doesn't get lost. So there's just still excuses happening. So like, as far as my hope for advocacy within the IFB and like helping a change within the IFB, I feel like I'm very, like, I don't know, my dreams and hopes there are a little bit crushed. But I feel like everyone that has left the IFB or is thinking about leaving the IFB, I feel like it's been very optimistic. We've seen so many people say, me too, and know that they're not alone anymore. And I think that's been amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And on the bright side, the momentum that we have on the page post-production is ours now. And so we can keep that going any way that we want to. And just even like 2 weeks ago, an article came out about a guy that was committing CSA crimes and he was linked to Grace Baptist. So there's always going to be more stories to tell. There's always going to be more people to help. And we've really built a platform to do so.
Yeah, that's incredible.
One thing, well, a few things. As far as IFB is IFB, and it's always going to be, probably always going to be IFB. There really is no changing it. There are several people that I know that are still within the IFB that, because of our situations, because we told our stories and because of the documentary, have demanded that their ministries that they are still in make changes, more transparency, cameras, etc. So I think some people are trying to make changes, or at least enough of a change to where they can say, see, we're on the up and up. We're one of the good ones. Oh, I know that you heard about IFB and that we're untrustworthy and these things have happened, but look, we're the good ones. We have cameras now. So
that's
there's a lot
so
of
they
that
can
going
record
on.
it.
Grace Baptist took IFB out of their website and stuff. So because well, at least I should say I haven't investigated that myself, but when I did a podcast with somebody, he asked me, like, how can you tell a church is an IFB church? I said, well, a lot of times you can go right on their website and it just says it. And he's like, well, I looked up Grace Baptist. It doesn't say it on there anymore. And I'm like, well, you can look at how they treat people. I don't know. Like, it caught me off guard because they are getting smart about it and they are taking that out of their name. Some of them are taking it off their websites and things like that, but the core is still IFB. And that's a little bit frustrating to me. It's almost like, I guess, a little bit of guilt there. Like, we showed them, we were exposing them and now they're finding a way around that.
Yeah. Well, luckily they're not too smart, so it's not too hard to stay one step ahead. So
they don't believe in like secular education, so I'm sure we could outsmart them anytime, right?
But they also raised us, so
I mean, that's true.
We're all a step back.
But so there have been some. I mean, I can't necessarily call them changes within the IFB, but they're trying to be smarter. There are some people that genuinely care, that are trying to make a positive influence in their teeny tiny little sphere. Individual churches that truly have a heart for people and want their ministries to be safe. But overall, the broad brush of things is a very, very dangerous group of ideologies that, well, me and my family are going to avoid forevermore. As far as advocacy is concerned, I feel like there's a lot that we want to do. Just as far as our advocacy is concerned, we want to, put out some more videos, put out a little bit more support, reach out to a lot of the people that reached out to us when the documentary came out. There are things that we're trying to do. So we're trying to make things as positive as possible. But I mean, the sheer number of victims makes it just sort of dismal. But I hate to sound IFB, but the value of one, like the real kind, though, reaching one person who can reach one person who can reach one person, and not for proselytization, but for victims helping other victims see what they need to happen for healing. And that's what we're trying to do in a roundabout sort of way. But, like, a lot of us are moms, a lot of us have full-time jobs, a lot of us have so much going on. And we're trying to work this in and around our lives and making sure that our children feel seen and heard and have that base that a lot of us didn't. And there's so much to do. There's so much to do. There is no lack of things that need to be done. There is a lack of people to do it, qualified people to do it, people who understand, and people who have been through IFB. A lot of times when you talk to a therapist, you almost have to start from square one and teach them about IFB. So people who came out of the system, I mean, if a whole bunch of them, or us, whoever, were to get counseling degrees and just help these people wholesale, and if financially, if we could, we all would, but having that knowledge base of what they came out of and the thought processes that need to be corrected to get someone out of that cult mentality and heal. Because, I mean, you're taught that you deserve death and hell. So rape, molestation, that's not hell. I'm not burning forever. I'm not being eaten by worms. I'm not, all the things that hell is said to be. So I'm a sinner saved by grace. And they teach you that these things just happen and we have to take it with a smile and we have to go through this and, be a good little testimony for Jesus. And to bust out of that and move forward in the real world is a very different ballgame. And that type of advocacy is very few and far between. And I would really love to see more and be a part of that change.
Yeah. Well, it's like Brianna said, it's like the slow, boring stuff. And it's always like, it's always in the times where there's nothing on the surface happening. And it's, I have people when I get really quiet on my end and they're like, nothing's happening. It seems like, what'd you run out of story? And it's like, those are the times where I feel like I'm on the phone with lawyers and people off mic and giving advice. And like, that's when like the real work's happening. And I feel like that's what you guys have been consistently doing. And, since it's come out, I know you guys are working really hard. I know you've got a lot going on in the background and really like Larissa and Ruthie, especially like sitting in that courtroom 2 years ago now, like it was heart shattering to see the two of you where you could feel this palpable sense that this wound had been reopened in a really real way. And like hearing Larissa, your, statement, Ruthie, your statement, which everyone's gotten to hear now, at least a portion of it. It was just a reminder of like, this stuff doesn't go away. And like, it's something that affects people their whole lives. And to see that in person in that setting was a great reminder to me of like why this stuff's important. And I really do. I hope that, more people will commit themselves to the boring work of, doing the basic stuff, like putting out the information that's there, the stuff that feels old hat, the stuff that feels tiring now, the stuff that feels like, okay, we've explained this before, like it's still needed. And there's new Ruthies, there's new Chelseas, there's new versions of that every day in different environments. And so I want to thank all of you for doing this interview. Cause I know it is late. There's so much going on during the week. So like, I know that there's a big piece there, but I appreciate all the work you've done behind the scenes. I know we don't get to all chat very often, but I really appreciate the work that you're all doing in this area. So thank you so much.
I appreciate the work that you're doing and still sharing, and it's still you yourself advocating, still doing your podcast, keeping it enlightened and just telling everyone, hey, it's still out there. This is still happening, and sharing all of our stories. I appreciate you still backing us, and I've enjoyed your friendship.
Yeah, absolutely. I need to interview each of you at some point. I don't know why it hasn't happened. Well, I do know. It's because I never reach out to people. I just wait. I'm like, they know I'm here, so reach out. So, but yeah, I'd love to.
Now you
chat
have all of
more.
our numbers.
Yeah. So we'll make it happen, and hopefully, again, season 2, we'll have a production crew fly us, and we can meet in person for free. That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.